So, Ricardo, thank you very much for doing this conversation with me at this incredible exhibition of your paintings. The title is Kailash. So, talk to me about Kailash and about these paintings, and what's the story with this work?
Well, kailash was a surprising discovery in my part. So having breakfast with a friend of mine in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and talking to him about the two other projects that I had been working on in the last 10 years, that I was looking for a third project to create a trilogy. And obviously the first two projects, which were called The Tomb of the Red Queen, which was the first one, the second called Odenwald, after a forest in Germany, which is also a cemetery site. And both of those are based on the culture of burials and the practice of burials. Even though my work is not based on the burials themselves, it's really more about the site and the culture.
So let me clarify. The Red Queen is a Mayan
Correct.
Story,
Yes.
and a history of the ancient Mayans and their burial. And Odenwald, when would that be in German history?
I discovered it in 2007. I think it had been already for 6 or 8 years, so we're talking about around 2000.
Okay.
And it's a concept that began in Switzerland, in which a person buys a tree for 99 years, and their remains, their ashes are buried in a biodegradable urn a few feet from the tree, so that they become part of the tree in short time.
So it's a very modern sort of green concept.
Exactly, yes.
Of recycling.
Yes, and then the whole family can be buried around the tree together.
Wow.
During the period of 99 years.
Okay. And then Kailash, explain Kailash.
As you know, Kailash is, for the Buddhists, the most important, the most sacred mountain monument in the earth.
It's in Tibet or Nepal?
It's in Tibet.
In Tibet.
In the western side of Tibet. For the Buddhists, Kailash is the center of the universe, and it's where life begins and ends. And it's also a place where they perform sky burials, which is a practice that has been forever in the Tibetan culture, where the priest cuts the body of the dead person,
Wow.
cuts it up completely in a very, very systematic way, like a butcher, and takes out all the organs, everything, so that the vultures come and take them to the sky. That's why it's called sky burials.
I see. So actually, you have the corpse is literally fed back to nature, back to the
Exactly.
universe.
Exactly.
Ancient recycling.
The ritual has so much to do with the mountain itself. There is a platform right next to the Mount Kailash, a natural platform, huge, where they bring the bodies. And they position the body with their feet towards the mountain and the head, in the back. And the family of the deceased is lined up behind, and everybody facing the mountain. So there's this relationship to the mountain. And then while the priest is performing the burial, the cutting the body, the family walks around the body in circles, like performing prostrations. That has to do it, and it links with the pilgrimage that you do when you do the mountain, around the mountain, which is called the Kora. It's the biggest natural monument on earth. The minute that I saw the image of the north face of Mount Kailash, and I saw the streaks made with the wind blowing the snow,
Right.
you know, all the snow and the wind. And because the mountain is made out of rock, so you have these striations. And I was working already in the Odenwald project when I discovered that I was looking literally at one of my paintings.
Yes, when I saw the photographs in the book of your paintings of the mountain, it looked like a mountain-sized Mazal painting.
Yes.
So that must have been shocking to see that the universe had created something that you were creating in your own painting.
Yes, yes. And so it was instant, this recognition of my own work
Yeah.
in the mountain. And then on the north side, on the top, the center of the top, there's a formation, a natural formation of a cobra head. And the cobra is a symbol of Shiva, the goddess Shiva.
Sure.
So my fascination just started growing and growing from that moment.
So tell me a little bit more about this. You discovered two things. One, the mountain, this enormous monument. Two, you witnessed this grotesque but sacred, dismemberment and recycling of the flesh back to nature. And now you're an artist and you make these fabulous paintings. Talk about how that came about.
Yes. I want to tell you an anecdote that when I was there and I asked our guide, I said, why did Buddhists choose this mountain? And he looked at me and like, I don't really understand. So I changed the question again and said, in another way to try to find out why this mountain. And he said to me, well, we didn't discover it. We didn't choose it. It chose us. The mountain was there. And something similar happens to me. I didn't choose to look for a project like Kailash. I think I was ready and it just was meant to happen.
It completed what you were already doing.
Yes.
You had the Mayan, ancient, the contemporary German, the notion of life, death, the cycles, and then you stumbled into Kailash and it completed your trilogy.
And I really believe that Kailash chose me
Yes.
to do what I did in this regard, in this project. So at that moment that I decided to go to Tibet, we began a process of research in which my wife helps me a lot, Fabiola. We studied for about a year before we went to Kailash. We trained in the mountains in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We need a lot of physical training before you go up there because you're trekking at 18,000 feet.
Right.
And it was during this time that we read about the sky burials. And this is one thing that you believe but don't believe. You're intellectually understanding what they're doing, but you think this is so primitive that I don't think it exists.
You see, you're reminding me of something that when I read about it, my association was to when I was a freshman medical school and anatomy lab. Now, that's normal for doctor training, but almost anyone, a layperson would go to an anatomy lab and see what we're doing and couldn't stand it. And here, this was a part of the total culture. The entire culture embraced this as an ordinary, normal way to complete the cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
And there are other factors involved here. Is that, for example, there is no wood in Tibet because of the altitude, so they don't cremate like they do in India or in Nepal. So sky burials makes a lot more sense for them as a way of integrating the bodies into the environment again.
Well, as a medical student, I spent a summer in Dharamsala studying Tibetan medicine, Buddhism, the rituals. I had initiations by one of the Rinpoches in the medicine Buddha, Trungpa Rinpoche, who was my particular teacher. And one of the things that is a part of the rituals are trumpets and bowls made of human skull and human thigh bone, and then covered the ends with silver and turquoise and decorated, and you blow the trumpet at certain times, and you use the bowl as a symbol of containment in the universe and so forth. And they have even little drums that are two pieces of skull together with, covered like a little drum, and you tick, 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 tick. They're used in pujas, in rituals. So the integration of body parts as a normal part of accepting impermanence, the essence of Buddhist teaching, that this body, as you say, is a vessel, it's impermanent, and coming to live peacefully with our mortality is one way that these things help people. The beads for praying, made out of human bone. So for Westerners, this seems like so off-putting, and yet in that history of that culture, these things are soothing in some way and used in the rituals.
The purpose of our trip to Tibet was mainly to photograph, and to photograph the north side of the mountain. And yet we had a number of experiences on the way to Kailash that really pointed to the fact that we were doing what we were meant to be doing. One of the purposes of my photographs was not only the mountain itself, but the prayer flags. Because the prayer flags, which are present everywhere, and
Yes.
why they put the prayer flags on top of the mountains and between valleys is so that the wind take the prayers, and the prayers can go all around the universe.
Right.
That's a fascinating idea. Photographing the prayer flags was photographing the movement. With the strong winds, the movement and the kind of blurredness, just the waviness of the prayer flags just flying on the air was fantastic. So that was the two things that I photographed that later became part of the work that I did back in my studio.
So actually, the story of the mountain and the mountain itself were compelling invitations for you that fit into what you were already doing.
Yes.
And you took that next step, then you make your pilgrimage to collect an experience, photographic, visceral in the observation of the culture and the people, experiential in terms of the adversity you had to go through. You had to make sacrifices. Fascinating.
The second day, after the 14 days just to get to the mountain, the second day we were there, they asked us, there was a couple from Switzerland, Buddhist couple that did the Kora, the pilgrimage many, many times. And they said to us, "Are you sure that you want to do this?" And I said, "Well, of course, that's why we're here for." Well, let me tell you that 16 people have already died this summer. And of course, we both, my wife and I, were very sure of ourselves that we were ready to do it. That we didn't doubt it for a second. But it was a very important eye-opener into the risks and what you had to give in order to receive.
Well, this is interesting because now you're becoming a part of the mountain's meaning.
Second experience after the mountain opened for us. We arrived at this little town, about 500 people, which is at the base of the mountain, where you stay there for the night and start the pilgrimage the following day. That night, suddenly the moon came out, and it was a full moon with such brightness. I told our driver, that I would pay him if he would take me at midnight, crossing rocks and rivers and to get as close as we could to the mountain so I could photograph it. And that was the birth of a series of photographs called Moon that I did just with using the light of the moon at night, because I had always doubted, how am I going to photograph a mountain without becoming like just a tourist type of beautiful photograph.
Right.
Something that would convey the mystery, I don't really understand it well enough. So the next day we were supposed to begin the pilgrimage, but there was a group of Indian priests that were going to go and pray in the north side of the mountain, and they had taken all the yaks. We were supposed to visit the platform where the sky burials take place at the end of our pilgrimage. So let's turn it around and let's go to that platform today.
Makes sense.
We'll have, so we just inverted the schedule. And so it happens that when we got to that platform where there are these huge, enormous poles where hundreds of thousands of prayer flags just flying there, and this really high platform you had to trek up there. And our guide said to us, there's a sky burial happening there, which just sealed the fact that, to me, that we were there for a reason. We were meant to be there for a reason. And so we were there. We were at a reasonable distance. We did not want to impose on the family.
Sure.
I did not photograph it. I have one photograph from a distance, just for myself. It's not something that I publish at all. But we were able to see for about a couple of hours how this process was. And well, it was an incredible experience.
I can imagine.
My objective was to reach the north side of the mountain, which I've mentioned that that was the side where I identified very much. And this is a mountain that is like a pyramid. So it's got its four sides. The north side is the one that has the head of the cobra and has these tremendous streaks of snow. The south side of the mountain, the one where you arrive and the first one you see, has the tail of the cobra in the center.
Oh my goodness.
And to me, it's a feminine side. Mm-hmm. From the strong testosterone, masculine part of the north side, the south side is exactly the opposite. So it's really fascinating, it's beautiful. But my objective was to photograph the north side so that from the photographs, I could come back to my studio, feed them into my computer, and then work both from the images of Kailash as well as from the paintings that I had recognized that had similarity, and then begin a process of virtual transformations and collages. And it's a very complex thing that I do in the computer by mixing reality with abstraction and mixing ideas and everything to come up with my sketches of what I'm going to be painting. Mm-hmm. So I spent easily 4 to 6 months in the computer. I could be painting and doing other things, but for this project, I spent 4 to 6 months working and analyzing the photographs and coming up with all kinds of ideas.
Let me ask you about that. Talk to me about the process in those months, how you would choose this one or not that one, or what would take you this way or that way.
I think to understand that, it's very important for me to tell you that on the second day of our pilgrimage, that we reached the north side of the mountain, instead of continuing the pilgrimage, I asked the guide that I wanted to stay there for a whole day. And we had to walk for about 1.5 miles towards the mountain going uphill, which is at 17,000 feet. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. And we literally were walking on glaciers until we got as close as I could so that I could take my telephotos and photograph every detail I could of the mountain without knowing what I'm going to do with all this material. Suddenly I was there photographing this, thinking to myself, where am I? I am literally in the end of the world, in the most remote place on earth.
Last man on earth.
Yes, and having this sensation of fear when the wind blows, suddenly the wind is blowing with such force, and you feel that you are so helpless, so small. But then that fear suddenly and immediately turns into awe and fascination and respect, and you say, this is so extraordinary that it just moves me from the most, profound way.
And I'm imagining that a human being 10,000 years ago would have had the same thing.
Yes.
So in some way you
course.
become a kind of timeless, universal experiencer of aloneness, terror, and awe at being human.
And this is the kind of things that you cannot preview. I mean, you cannot imagine that you're going to experience, but if you go open-minded and open-heart, then these things started happening. And the reason I mention this is because that single experience became the focal point of my paintings.
And that's what I guessed must have happened. Something profound. This is so important, I think, for ordinary people to understand about the artistic process and how it is so different than science. Maybe driven by the same curiosities, but the methods are very different.
And what remained with me was that experience, that moment that I felt as terrified as fascinated at the same time. And when I did the first kailash large-scale painting, which was exhibited here at the gallery 2 years ago in this series called Cora. So this exhibition right now is an offspring. It's a second stage.
A second stage, yes.
From the original exhibition of kailash. But that was called Cora, not kailash.
Right.
And the very large-scale painting that I did had to convey those two things. And I don't know if it conveyed them to the public, but it did when I finished the painting.
Yes.
And I looked at it, and I had never done a painting that was so raw, black and white. And I just said to myself, who's gonna wanna live with this thing? And I knew that when I finished that painting, and I had that same feeling of fear, because sometimes a painting that is new and challenging and rough can, you can feel fear.
Sure.
And yet I loved it. And I said, why do I love it? I don't know why I love it. But there was that same feeling, and I knew that then I was there.
Yes.
I was able to convey that experience of the trip, of the years of preparation into painting, which is, I think, where painting is fantastic.
It sounds to me like this project for you has been a single continuous exploration in your own personal, mission to get past the mystery, past the fear of just being a human being. And as an artist, every time you discover and go past, you make paintings that then you give them out. And so other people can get inspired and meditate on them and whatnot. So take me back to the Red Queen, the beginning of this. You're Mexican. This is a Mexican ancient Mayan. I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, the Red Queen was a very visual thing. Back in 2000, I was living in New York, and a friend of mine, a very dear friend, who's a great Mexican artist, Laura Anderson, she called me one day and she said, I want to tell you that I just saw the most fascinating place in Palenque, Mexico, and that it reminded me so much of your red paintings. And and she said, it's the tomb of the Red Queen. So here I am living in New York, never having very little to do with the archaeology in Mexico. And I've been in Palenque before, but this was a tomb discovered in 1994. So it was very recent.
Very recent.
And the tomb is from the year 600.
Wow.
And she said, it's called the Red Queen. I said, okay. I'd never worked on a project before at that point in 2003. I've always worked on very personal things, but this was the first time that I was exposed to taking a project outside of my own experience and integrating it into my experience. So I said to myself, I'm not going to begin this project in my studio in New York with red paints. I'm going to begin this project when I go to Palenque. This is in 2003. I had my little camera and I started shooting in pitch dark. And I started shooting the jungle. And I saw in the little screen these branches that looked very much like my drawings. And I got very excited. This is something that you get with the new technology. You get the digital cameras, the instant photographs, and I'm seeing that, so I'm going click, 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 click. And I take 300 photographs in a period of, 10, 15 minutes or whatever. And I went back to the hotel, very excited. I downloaded it into my laptop. Immediately, I took one of those photographs, inverted it, and it looked like a charcoal drawing. And this was the beginning of my work with the computer, the transformation from reality to abstraction.
I see.
This is when I realized that it was really growing from the place. It was not something I was inspired in my New York studio,
Right.
but it was something coming from the source. My work doesn't begin and end with a painting.
Yes.
My work begins, 6 months, 1 year before the painting, and it keeps going after the painting.
Yes.
In terms of the installation of it, in terms of all the research, all the what I begin to understand of it, and how to put it together, sometimes in very complex ways.
Right.
For example, in the Kailash project that I'm presented in Mexico in this museum, this fantastic museum, was an installation where I projected videos onto the floor of people doing prostrations.
Oh, from the Kailash mountain.
From the Kailash
So
mountain.
literally, on the floor, a video of the prostrating Tibetans.
Yes.
Interesting. Fascinating.
Yes. So I was creating a very complex installation where there were photographs, video, paintings.
So the viewer would have almost a virtual experience of watching a prostrating person in Kailash that you saw yourself.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Now, it was inverted. Now, over there I had the mountain. Here I had the abstract paintings that came from the mountain and a metaphor of the prostrations on the floor of the museum. So I had two videos projected onto the floor, and one of them projected on a wall in a separate room, which I had abstracted that video. It was low quality, so when I extended it, it started to pixelate, and then we played with the colors and the movement and the speed of the video to make it a more abstract video, that you see a body, but you're not sure exactly what it is, and it's going on to the floor. Mysterious, yes.
Yeah.
But then when you go in and see all the abstract paintings, and then you see the more reality video on the floor, then you realize what it is. And that kind of experience is what I'm more interested in. I'm not really, and this may sound not too good, but I'm not interested in the paintings by themselves out of context,
Well,
out of everything.
let me say it in a way that I think may be more what you mean. The paintings aren't an end point. They're a mark in a process of life and expression and channeling your private experience of mystery and awe and transcending fear and to understanding your mortality, and then, like the prayer flags, connecting a way to send out the experience you had personally in an ongoing process. The paintings are like a flag. They're a piece of a bigger story.
Yes.
And you're, a maker in that process, a participant, observer, and a source. Listen, I think we should stop here and walk around and talk about the paintings. I want to thank you very much for a goose flesh journey with you. You took me to places in your story. Now let's go look at some of the paintings, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about a few of them. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Great. Thank you.